Did you know that Christopher Nolan recreated the Trinity test's massive nuclear blast without using any CGI? Instead, he used layered explosions and real effects to capture the terrifying beauty of the first atomic bomb. Every shift from writing in the first person to inventing black and white IMAX film transformed Oppenheimer into the powerful experience it is. Let's dive into these creative changes and see how Nolan's bold ideas shaped the film we see today. Christopher Nolan, the famous filmmaker of Interstellar and Inception, took a unique approach while writing Oppenheimer that set the film apart from traditional biopics. Instead of following the usual third-person format for scripts, Nolan chose to write key sequences in the first person from Oppenheimer's perspective. This wasn't part of his original plan, but as he began drafting the screenplay, he felt that the conventional approach wasn't capturing the intensity of Oppenheimer's experience. He felt the urge to use voiceover to bring the audience closer to Oppenheimer's thoughts, but knew that wasn't the right fit for this film. While quarantining with his brother, Jonathan Nolan, also a writer-director, Nolan tried an experiment. He rewrote parts of the script in the first person. He showed it to Jonathan without mentioning the change, and Jonathan immediately understood the impact. For Nolan, the shift to the first person in stage directions helped bring Oppenheimer's mental state to life. The new format meant that readers, actors, producers, and the whole creative team would feel immersed in Oppenheimer's perspective as if they were in his mind. But what if I told you that some of the film's most intense scenes were inspired by real events? Early in Oppenheimer, we see a tense moment as the young scientist moves to Europe to pursue his studies. Eager to learn from brilliant minds, he becomes frustrated when his mentor, Patrick Blackett, tells him he can't attend a lecture by the famous physicist Niels Bohr. In a moment of anger, Oppenheimer impulsively injects Blackett's apple with cyanide, but he quickly regrets it and rushes back to retrieve the poison apple, only to find Bohr himself about to take a bite. In a panic, Oppenheimer flings the apple away just in time, narrowly averting disaster. While this scene is based on a real-life incident, the film adds its own spin. Historically, Oppenheimer did try to poison Blackett, as his friend Francis Ferguson later recounted, but it's unclear if he used cyanide, as the consequences would have been far more severe. The film also adds Bohr to the scene, probably to highlight Oppenheimer's admiration for him and add tension between the two. Speaking of capturing history, you'd think filming in the town of Los Alamos would be easy, but Nolan hit a surprising obstacle and had to take a different approach. Originally, Christopher Nolan wanted to film the actual town of Los Alamos, New Mexico, to capture an authentic sense of place. But modern-day Los Alamos has changed considerably, with a Starbucks and other new developments that don't match the 1940s look needed for the film. So instead, Nolan's team recreated the town of Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. This was a major undertaking. It took 3 months to build a set that authentically represented the era. Despite all that effort, they only used the set for 6 days of filming. When it comes to visuals, Nolan never takes the easy route. But did you know he actually had to invent black and white IMAX film for Oppenheimer? For Oppenheimer, he shot much of the movie on IMAX, and he wanted certain scenes to be in black and white, but the black and white IMAX film stock didn't exist. To bring his vision to life, Nolan teamed up with Kodak and Photochem, who developed this type of film stock specifically for Oppenheimer. This innovation allowed him to switch smoothly between color and black and white, giving the movie a unique style that captures the intensity of certain moments, especially those that reflect Oppenheimer's internal struggles and key events in his life. And how do you portray the raw power of the first atomic bomb without CGI? The Trinity test sequence in Oppenheimer is visually unforgettable, but the journey to create it was far from straightforward. Cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema, who has worked with Christopher Nolan on major projects since Interstellar, started with no clear method to depict the massive, terrifying beauty of a nuclear blast. His initial idea was simply to play around and see what works, as there was no way to recreate a true nuclear explosion. Early concepts involved single explosions filmed as realistically as possible, but the team soon realized this approach wouldn't fully capture the magnitude they wanted. So they tried something completely different. Van Hoytema and his team layered multiple smaller explosions filmed from various angles and scales and combined them to give the impression of one enormous blast. This pieced together approach, where each element contributed to the illusion of a monumental explosion, differed vastly from the initial plan of a single, straightforward recreation. The final look was also deeply inspired by eyewitness accounts from scientists who saw the real Trinity test. These accounts described vivid details like the shifting colors from white to intense hues, and then to a lingering fire. Originally, they hadn't planned to include these detailed color transitions, but the team eventually used them to change lighting throughout the sequence. Now, not every intense moment in Oppenheimer sticks to the facts. In Oppenheimer, there's a chilling exchange where Major General Leslie Groves is briefed on the possibility that the atomic bomb could destroy the entire world. When Oppenheimer reassures him that the chance is near zero, Groves nervously laughs, saying he'd prefer if the chance were exactly zero. While this moment adds tension, it's actually a fictional twist. In reality, Groves wasn't involved in these apocalyptic calculations at all. The possibility that the atomic bomb might ignite the atmosphere was mostly discussed among scientists, based on calculations by physicist Edward Teller. Another one of the most unsettling lines in Oppenheimer wasn't written by Christopher Nolan, but was suggested by actor James Raymer, who played U.S. Secretary of War Henry Stimson. In a scene where government officials discuss potential targets for the atomic bomb, Stimson insists that they avoid bombing Kyoto because he and his wife honeymooned there. During an interview with the New York Times, Nolan explained that he encouraged his supporting actors to research their characters deeply due to the film's large cast and its focus on Oppenheimer's perspective. Raymer's own research revealed that Stimson had indeed honeymooned in Kyoto, which inspired him to suggest the line. The scene where Oppenheimer learns of Jean Tatlock's death, played by Florence Pugh, as his former lover, was originally meant to dig deep into his feelings, contrasting his grief with Kitty's tough response. But things didn't go as planned. As the team was setting up, they realized they were running out of daylight fast, so they had to rush the filming. Cillian Murphy, who plays Oppenheimer, remembered how there wasn't much time to think things over. He and Emily Blunt, who played Kitty, his second love affair in the film, had to dive into the intense emotions of the scene. Murphy later shared that this pressure, though unplanned, actually worked in their favor. The time crunch forced them to be raw and real, capturing an honest, unfiltered performance that might have felt less intense with extra takes. Other than that, the crybaby scene in Oppenheimer became much more meaningful as Christopher Nolan fine-tuned his vision for the film. At first, he planned it as a simple clash between Oppenheimer and President Truman, but as he worked on the scene, Nolan realized it needed to show a deeper moment, Oppenheimer's breaking point. In the final version, this scene is all about what Oppenheimer is feeling. After the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he expects some acknowledgement for wrestling with the weight of what he's done. But instead, Truman calls him a crybaby, completely crushing Oppenheimer's belief that his concerns matter. Nolan wanted this to feel like a quick drop, from the highest pride in his achievement to the lowest rejection, showing just how fast Oppenheimer's world crumbles. Nolan had also originally planned for a more straightforward ending, but he later decided to keep it open-ended, letting viewers think about Oppenheimer's legacy for themselves. But even with his world collapsing, one line has stayed tied to Oppenheimer's legacy. One of the film's most controversial changes involves Oppenheimer's use of the famous line from Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." In Oppenheimer, this line is quoted twice, during a scene between Oppenheimer and Jean Tatlock, and again after the atomic bomb test. But neither instance is accurate to how Oppenheimer used the quote in real life. The only confirmed record of Oppenheimer quoting this line comes from a 1956 NBC News documentary titled The Decision to Drop the Bomb. Reflecting on his role in creating the bomb, he said, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." In post-production, the plans for Oppenheimer took a few unexpected turns. Jennifer Lame, who also edited Tenet, worked with Nolan to put the film together. Originally, they planned for a traditional editing style, but with so many fast-paced scenes, they ended up focusing on character passes, focusing on each character to ensure they were clear in each scene. This extra attention wasn't part of the original plan, but helped make the characters stand out better in the fast-moving story. For visual effects, Nolan wanted to keep everything as real as possible, so the team relied on practical, on-set effects rather than heavy CGI. Andrew Jackson, the visual effects supervisor, and his team at DNEG used over 400 real elements shot on set. But to make the Trinity test explosion look as massive and powerful as Nolan wanted, they ended up adding digital layers to create a fuller effect. So even though they started with mostly practical shots, the final explosion scene became a blend of both real and digital effects. In total, 160 visual effects artists worked on the film, but only 26 received credit. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Tinseltown Unscripted for more content like this.